a paranormal type of.
Oh, I didn't mean. I was
Yeah.
continuing the joke about me being ghostly and creepy.
Just this is a subject I think theologians don't talk about as much as they used to that they should.
Yeah. No, and it's legitimate in the fact that it
We're
has a
live.
yep, it has
Okay.
crossover.
Good
All right.
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. Now, I know we promised last week, and we're making a bad habit of this.
This could become a running joke. This could be the subject that we just never do.
I think maybe
It
we
just
need.
keeps getting
I think we
bumped.
need to stay on target and just do it next week, no matter what, unless we get like, I don't know, if
Stay on
you know
target.
Stephen King emails us and wants to
Stay
do a
on
show next
target.
week, we'll make an exception. But otherwise, we got to do the contracts with the devil next week, one way or the other.
We should get the rights to play Devil Went Down to Georgia.
So, at any rate, there is a story, or there's a YouTube video, I should say, that kind of inspired us to switch topics this week. It's from a channel called Let Me Explain Studios. It's a very good animation channel on YouTube. I would definitely recommend checking it out. But the name of the video is "Don't Listen to the Demon," and it deals with a topic that, while it's not what most people think of as demonology, because technically it's not demonology at all, it is a theological subject that I don't think gets enough attention. That's near and dear to a lot of the hearts related to the show, which theologians used to call this the ordinary activity of demons. So there's ordinary demonic activity, which is what we're going to talk about, and then there's what we usually talk about on this show, the possessions and exorcisms and all that. That would be the extraordinary. That's not what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about tonight, often, maybe even most of the time, isn't technically demonic. Although I think demons have a hand in it. And it's what I kind of like to call the other voice. So we all have that voice in our head that we call the conscience, that tells us to do the right thing, that tells us when we're about to do something we know is wrong. But there's the other voice we all have too. The voice that tells us, on one level, it's the opposite of the conscience. Yeah, go ahead and cheat on the test. Go ahead and stay out past curfew. Go ahead and have another beer. It doesn't matter. But there's another side to both voices that the video Don't Listen to the Demon talked about. And I think, and what we're really going to talk about tonight, and I think is more insidious and much more dangerous, which is that little voice in your head that says you're not good enough. That tells you nobody cares. You're not worth anything. Go ahead and kill yourself.
Yeah. And this is, on a personal note, this is a very personal topic for me as someone who suffers from severe depression and has for a number of years. Even when I was out a few weeks ago, I was actually in a psychiatric hospital getting treatment for the condition. And in the weeks and stuff since, I've done a lot of research and I've been given a lot of tools to talk about it and to deal with it. And I think it does tie in because that voice is something that someone who suffers from depression is very familiar with.
And I think this is important because that voice is something that someone with depression like yourself, and like a lot of people, folks, mental illness is stigmatized in this country, and it's a load of horse shit.
Yeah.
Forgive my language, but there's no better way to put it. But, depression is incredibly common. Most people experience it at some point in their life. Myself, I do not suffer clinical depression, and before the grace of God go I, that I've never had to be institutionalized for it or put in a hospital or anything of that nature. But I've had situational depression like most of us. The thing is, everyone hears this voice from time to time. And in my experience, and I'm sure in your own, as an artist, I do magic, I do some writing, I do radio. Brian as an artist as well as a writer, and all the other artists I've ever talked to, there is an inherent sense, sometimes even among very successful ones, of being a failure.
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome.
Or an imposter.
Yeah.
Which is part of this too, and it's what makes this such an insidious topic.
And I actually found out one of the things that I'll talk about, there's a scientific basis for it.
Really?
for the correlation. Yeah, I didn't realize it. I didn't know about it before, but in some of the groups that I've been in and some of the people that I've heard talk, there's a very good scientific reason for why this comes up so much.
I'm not actually surprised just because it does come up so much. You'd think there would be a reason. But it's interesting they found it and they acknowledged it.
Yeah. Well, because the brain essentially, the brain has two very dominant portions. It has the prefrontal lobe, which is the thinking brain, the sort of the super ego that they used to call in psychological terms, but it's actually more than that. It's the thought process.
Yeah.
It's the reason. It's all of the logical essences of the brain. Then you have the hippocampus, which is the feeling part of the brain that deals primarily in emotions and emotional memory. And there's in creative types, naturally, you have a much stronger sort of brain hippocampus area. You have a much stronger creative feeling side. You're much more in touch with emotions. Well, unfortunately, when the emotional side outbalances the thinking side, you have what's called an off kilter situation with the brain, where the emotions are kind of overriding the logical thought process.
That's interesting. The thing that occurs to me there as well, and it's another point I think people tend to forget, a lot of very intelligent people
Oh yeah.
also have severe, even like Einstein, people like that, they're thought of as very analytical,
Yeah.
still have severe emotional problems.
Yeah, because they were still very creative. Now, the thing is to not confuse this with, this doesn't mean that people with high creativity aren't also smart or capable
Often
of
they
thought.
they usually are.
Yeah, it's the two different part of the brains that evolved for two different purposes. You have the hippocampus and the limbic system that are the basis of the fight or flight response that kept us alive.
Yeah.
Pretty much for millions of years. The prefrontal lobe is the newer part. That is what allows us to reason and to think and stop and contemplate things. And it's just two different types of intelligence. There's emotional intelligence and there's, intellectual intelligence. And both are equally valid and both equally useful. It's just when you have things like, and this is getting into, I'll let you go into your thing, but this is something I'll go into later with some of my notes here, is when you have the emotional center of your brain overriding the thinking part, what happens is you get into situations like with trauma and with PTSD, where you're in a situation where intellectually you are completely aware that you're safe, but emotionally your brain is experiencing a panic sensation, and it's being told that you're in danger, and that fight or flight response is kicking in, and it is flooding your brain with emotion that is stopping you from being able to think clearly and to think rationally. And the same thing happens to a lesser extent, but over a more prolonged period, with something like depression. Your emotional brain tells you, you're not good, you're worthless, you have these thoughts, and your intellectual mind is weakened by the imbalance, and so it's not fighting back as hard as it is in a regular person.
And here's the thing. This has an undeniable chemical, scientific, psychiatric component.
Yes.
I personally, as a religious person, that we are more than physical beings. There is a spiritual component to things. I do believe that while demons are not the cause of mental illness, and that is a common superstition that should long have been put to bed. They certainly take advantage of it, and there's a saying that I've seen among priests that have talked to actual ordained exorcists, that the priests don't want to get involved in exorcism because they don't want to make an enemy of the devil. And what they don't understand is, since oldest times, before we've had recognized psychiatrists, even, not to belittle psychiatrists and psychologists, they do an important job, but when you had a mental problem, when you had a social problem, when you had these kinds of problems, you went to a priest. And a lot of priests still start, there are good things and bad things that can be said about this, but a lot of places throughout the country, if you don't have if you can't afford health insurance, or if, I have my issues with the ACA, but it's mandating of coverage for psychiatric problems is not one of those issues. But back when your health insurance didn't cover psychiatric treatment, priests were a cheap, sometimes even free way of getting some kind of counseling.
Well, and even today, there are people that, because of their beliefs, aren't comfortable going and seeking out psychiatric or
This is
psychological
also
help.
true.
If that is the case, then by all means, go see a priest. Some help is better than no help.
Yeah, and some priests are actually, the late Father Joseph Brose, who was a longtime friend of mine and a friend of the show when it was still a YouTube channel because he passed away before he moved to radio. Although I think he's still looking down on us. He was an actual trained clinical therapist. He'd gone to school. He had degrees. He was a priest. He was an exorcist, but he understood the psychological component of it. And I want to comment because a lot of times, and here's the other thing I think that's significant for the more skeptical people out there. Like, Brian, you yourself are more of a skeptic than I am.
Generally, yeah, I'm an open-minded skeptic.
Which is good. Yeah. But there's a certain value into externalizing the voice, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not a bad thing to do even from a psychological standpoint because it helps. It helps you fight back.
Yeah, when you're dealing with an emotional problem, it's nebulous. It's not something you can visualize, you can relate to fighting as easily. Now you give it a form, you give it a name, you call it the demon, the demon from the angel and the demon on your shoulder. Now it's something you actually struggle against. And, even the Bible relates to this. James 4:7, submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. This is an important quote, particularly because the first part of it gets cut off when it's quoted all the time. And people are like, oh, just resist the devil, and he will flee. And in this particular instance, if you're a religious and a spiritual person, certainly focusing on the divine is a useful way of helping to fight depression, if that's part of your worldview. I'm not saying you have to be religious to get out of a depressive situation. That's ridiculous.
Faith is a powerful tool.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're not a religious or spiritual person, focus on the good and the positive, and fight back. You can't just fight because you'll wear yourself out. You have to have something positive. You have to have a reason for fighting over.
And what's funny is this is another one that I can bring sort of a scientific basis to for people that aren't religious or spiritual in any way. What happens in the brain is as you think, like when you get into these thought patterns, everybody develops thought patterns and core beliefs, or what they're called, and they are pretty well deeply etched into your brain. There are circuits in your brain that pretty much, when you set these things up, if you say to yourself over and over again, over years and years, I'm worthless, there is essentially, in a biological sense, there is a I'm worthless circuit in your brain that lights up every time you think that thought, and it becomes stronger and stronger the more you think of it. If, on the other hand, if you start challenging that belief and replace it with something else, and there are some questions here, ways that you can challenge your beliefs that are very helpful, and it can be something as simple as, the first one is, what's the evidence for and against that? If your automatic tendency is to say, I suck, I'm a loser, it's just always been that way, my luck's always been bad, my life's always been bad. Okay, challenge yourself to sit down and write out what in your life, says that you're, a loser or a bad person, and what's the evidence against it. And I'll bet you find the evidence in the against column winds up being longer than the for column, but you've trained yourself to start thinking that way, and so that thought just automatically pops into your head. The more you fight it, however, you start creating a different thought pattern that erases the other one, because brain cells regenerate. They die, and new ones are created all the time. So as you think, you build new thought patterns every day. So there are always that opportunity to change your thoughts. And you're literally changing your physical landscape of your brain in doing so. And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't realize how powerful thoughts are.
Okay, for one thing, I want to hit right now, because we don't normally do this, as early as I'm going to, but I want to do this now.
Sure.
The number to call in is at the bottom of the screen, 609-807-2492. 609-807-2492. I know there are a lot of people out there that, in my friends list, in Brian's friends list,
Oh, yeah.
in our producer, or my fiance, in our combined friends list, there are a lot of people that are suffering from this right now. Please, if anybody has a story, if they want, or even if you need some emotional support, we'll do. I mean, neither of us is a psychiatrist or therapist or anything of that nature, but we'll reach out. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do, I agree, absolutely, changing the thought patterns. And sometimes just the act of asking for help has its own power.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also want to give two of my favorite quotes, one of which is from a real person, the other one of which is from a fictional person, but I think they're both good. One is from the late Father Joe, who said, and I love this saying of his, God does not make junk. Or to use a similar quote from Doctor Who, in 900 years of space and time, I've never met anyone who wasn't important. Everyone has worth.
Yeah.
If you want to talk on a scientific level, I think to talk about the profoundness of human life, consider this. Billions of years before you were born, stars died. Material from those stars worked its way across the universe and have become part of you. So much so that the stuff of the stars that make up your right hand are probably different than the stars that make up your left. Every single living person on this planet is literally made up of star stuff. Stars died so that you could live. You have value.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care whether it's purely psychological, spiritual, or a combination, or as I personally think, combination of the two. That internal voice does so much damage.
Yeah, it's one of the most under recognized, I think, problems that are out there, because we've become so familiar with it. We take it as the norm, and we don't realize that you can do something about it. You don't have to think that way or live that way. There's really no reason that you have to.
And it doesn't mean you need a blown-up sense of self-importance, because pride is no more healthy than despair. But recognizing your self-worth, that we all have self-worth.
Exactly.
And, this is something in particular that Christian religious teaching gets disgustingly twisted on. In this idea that, well, we're all sinners, so we're all worthless. No. Humans are not, God created us for a reason. Yes. And here I think it's the great mistake people make about the idea that we're all sinners. Yeah. You know what? I'll say it. I'll say it outright. Every single person is a sinner, which is to say that every single person living on this earth is less than perfect.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yes. One of the biggest things that mental traps that people fall into is perfectionism, and being able to accept that you're not perfect and that's okay. You don't have to, you don't have to be perfect in anything.
As I like to think of it as Christian, the job of the perfect human being was taken 2,000 years ago when Jesus was born. He isn't dead yet, so the job isn't available. Stop trying to take it. And by the same token, again, if you want to go scripture, St. Paul, who was originally, of course, Saul, said in scripture, I am the chief of all sinners. And keep in mind, this is a man who slaughtered Christians for their faith, who, according to the Bible, was given a vision of Christ that redeemed him. You're not that bad. You are not. You are not expected to be perfect, and you are not the worst human being who ever lived.
No, we could throw up some pretty good candidates for that vote, but yeah, most of them are not listening to us in the audience right now.
Yeah, I don't think any of them are likely listening to us in the audience.
No. Hitler? You there? We got the ghost of Adolf
Stalin.
Hitler online too. Stalin, maybe.
Pol Pot.
Oh God, yeah. That's just in recent memory. I mean, you go back a couple hundred years, you get some real winners.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
You're not junk. You're not the worst person and it sounds silly because the people who have never been through the worst of this are probably listening to me going, I know I'm not the worst person who ever lived.
Oh yeah.
But people that get deep into depression and despair do think this way.
You feel it. You feel it in every bone in your body, and I can attest to that. And and it's a shame because literally there's a question on here that says, would I tell a friend this in a similar situation? Like if somebody you knew and liked or loved and cared about came to you and said, so I've done this, this, and this, would you say, oh my God, you are just the worst? You were just awful. No, you probably wouldn't, unless you're a really terrible person yourself. So why would you tell yourself that? And people do all the time.
It's a subject I've talked about more than once before, and it's an important one. Spiritually, it's an important one psychologically, which is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the kicker is, a lot of people are much faster to forgive other people than they are to forgive themselves.
Yeah.
We're our own worst critics.
Very true.
And the reality is, from a spiritual perspective, whether demons are doing it or not, they dance a jig when people do this sort of thing because you destroy yourself.
Yeah, and it doesn't take much, and that's the really sad part. Is if there is in some cases a more paranormal element to this, as Kevin said, it doesn't take much.
It's a nudge.
We do so much of it to ourselves, and like I said, the way the brain works is the more you do it, the easier it becomes to do it, and eventually you wear down. The other big culprit that a lot of people might not be aware of is stress.
Oh God!
One of the causes of depression, from a biological standpoint, there's a hormone called cortisol that is manufactured in your body when you feel stress. As far as what I've been told from an actual neurobiologist that ran the class, so this isn't just some quack medicine, feel good kind of book that this is coming out of. This is someone who studies the brain and how it actually works in a hard scientific standpoint.
There's more about it than both of us put together.
Yeah. So this cortisol, one of the things that it does is it damages the prefrontal lobe. If you have sustained stress over time, your prefrontal lobe becomes literally damaged. It kills brain cells. It makes the thinking part of your brain weaker, and it makes it harder for you to resist that overwhelming urge from the emotional, possibly damaged, possibly traumatized part of your brain. It makes it harder and harder to resist. So the more stress you put yourself under, the worse things essentially get. And also, it says here, after 30, the brain starts to decline in its size and ability to function, the rate depending on genetics and how well you take care of it. Things like good diet, exercise, sleep, positive thinking, socializing, and maintaining a healthy weight. So a lot of this is common sense, but it's not that we don't think of the brain that much when we think about, keeping in shape or doing whatever. But yeah, if you're over 30, you start to notice things change for you. And there's a reason for it, and you have to fight all the harder. And I think, like what Kevin said, is very true. If you can put a face and an image to this depression rather than thinking of it as you, because you hurting yourself is worse. If you think of it as an external force, it is a little easier sometimes to get some distance from it, to challenge those thoughts when those thoughts pop up and say, you didn't do this well enough, you're not good enough, all of that. Challenge them. Make your brain, prove the point, or the demon or whatever. Make it prove its point.
You want an example of this? Aside from we're talking all about demons here. Another example of this from a popular series, the Dementors in the Harry Potter series, are a physical representation of what it felt like going through depression for J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
There are other imagery. It's this idea of externalizing it. and realizing that this isn't your whatever is telling you this is not your better half, and it's not the part of you you should be listening to.
No, and most of the time it's a set of bad thinking that either someone else put into your sort of bag of what you think of yourself from an early age, or it's a faulty idea that you've come up with for whatever reason. Oh, we have a call.
Put them through. That's
awesome.
Probably Baron Voltage.
It is.
Aha!
Baron, how are you, my friend?
I am fantastic.
So how you liking so far?
Ah, I'm alive. That tune could use a little bit of tuning, but then again, hey, not complaining.
So as I understand it, you have your own story to share.
Yes.
Don't we always?
Of course, and you're always welcome here.
Thank you. All right. Remind me again. Topic of the day. I actually just got home, so I'm
okay.
was trying to rush home for it.
We're talking about the internal voice.
Oh yes.
Yeah, the
oh,
demon.
yes.
The demon was depression and
I mean, there's been more than enough times that I could say that I'll be driving down the road. As a matter of fact, earlier today, and the suicidal ideation tends to come to mind. The voice in your head suddenly starts saying, maybe I should just turn the car off the road.
Yeah.
And then it seems to occur a lot during times of immense stress, and also tends to, become severely prominent whenever opportunities present themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you'll see cars, they'll come up fairly close, and you say to yourself, just one small flick of the wheel. That's all it would take. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually a French term for that that I can't remember, or it's French or German. It's like the call of the void. It's like you don't actually have to mean or want to do it, but something about it's like that urge when you stand on the edge of a ledge or something and you look down at a great height, you get this weird thing of like,
jump.
I should jump. That'd be really interesting.
Yes.
And like there's there's a term for it.
I've had this.
Yeah.
I mean, I like I said, grace of God go I. I've never suffered from clinical depression, but I'll say flat out, I've had that voice of jump.
I think there might be
do something.
Yeah, I think there might be something universal in it where it is something that happens, and then obviously for most normal people that don't have any sort of damage, they're going to brush it aside and go, yeah, that's nuts. If you're damaged and you're working on pure emotion and you're already feeling down, suddenly that becomes a little harder
loud.
to resist.
Yeah.
It's loud, and I myself, I suffer from my own, and the damage is prominent enough to the point where the volume is always cranked. So it certainly is not one that is easily surmountable. But there are plenty of opportunities, say, when the voice gets loud at the same time, it can dial back a bit just as easily because there's always a secondary voice that can counter it. It's just a question of how loud it can get.
See, we're talking about the voice of the demon, but there is the voice of the angel.
Yeah.
Yes. There's always a counter. It's a strange sort of yin-yang sort of balance to it. And depending on how deep into the depression you get or how intense the anxiety is really determines the volume of one or the other. And it tends to delve a little bit in the supernatural for those of us that are also afflicted in that regard. Mm-hmm. Hello, Mr. Prominent right here.
Yeah,
yeah, and it gets coupled with various other types of good example. I was using the driving analogy, right? But then when you get home, even more will get thrown to you. More opportunities, and you end up subconsciously almost looking for options. And you don't know where it's coming from either, because sometimes you may not even be that depressed or anxious. It just kicks in there. And you have to wonder, is this brain chemistry that's messing with me? Or is this the thing that's been on my back for so dang long and I can't get rid of it?
Yeah. And the answer is it could be both or either.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one feeds into the other in its own way.
Exactly.
And Prime example of that.
Listeners, if you're wondering, just looking up statistics, yeah, as of 2015, suicide was the second leading cause of death in people ages 15 to 34, and the third for children between 10 and 14.
Yeah, which is just unbelievable.
Astronomical, yeah.
This is
Yeah.
men are more likely than women. 70% of suicides in the U.S. are committed by men, according to the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a huge, real thing. A lot of people listening have probably known somebody who's at least made an attempt.
Oh, yes.
My best friend committed suicide some time back. It's a real thing. This is what. And note, folks, if you're wondering why we've strayed so far off of our usual topics and our more lighthearted attitude, this is why.
Yeah, I mean, there are some jokes I could make, but it's a serious topic, and I want to be, respectful to it and to the people that like me that deal with this stuff. I mean,
right.
There's always, we can throw in some gallows humor, but
sometimes you just take it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is I'll be honest with you, and this is not only one coming from somebody that has lost friends to it, but somebody that's made a number of attempts before. Sometimes the humor is the only way to kind of diffuse a little bit of it.
Oh, God,
because sometimes you do have to laugh about it to yourself, especially if you're somebody that has contemplated or somebody that has attempted it and come back from it. It makes it a hell of a lot more manageable, to be honest with you, because then you can just say to yourself, my priorities there were just a bit on the jack side, and and this is something that I always tell somebody, and it's funny that this topic was this week, because just last night I was talking to an old friend of mine. It was a former trooper of mine when I was still stationed in the Air Force. Okay? Mm-hmm. I had to talk a shotgun out of his mouth.
Oh, God.
Last night, I kid you not, on my mother.
Wow.
And this guy was going through all kinds of hell. His wife, he suspects, is screwing around on him. A whole bunch of things. And right now, he's stationed in a place that, he's alone. He's waiting for her to come to him. He got sent ahead to set the house. So he's on his own, and he has no other support systems. So you can imagine my surprise when he called me up, of all people. I hadn't seen the kid since 2012.
Thank God.
And I spot him on Facebook, but that's about it.
Good on you for stepping up.
It's also the reality that reality is if somebody wants to commit suicide, they don't make phone calls.
Yeah.
People who make calls usually are looking for a way out, and there are exceptions, granted.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. Usually, there's three types. You have the ones that will do it without telling anybody they're thinking about it. And you got the ones that will only seek help when they're really not thinking about it. And then you've got that third type where it's really scary. They're looking for a reason not to because they can't, but they still have enough logic in their mind
That's
to
the
look
third
for
type
it.
is what I'm talking about. It's not that they're not serious. And folks, let me tell you, because I've had a little bit of crisis hotline training on this one, always take someone considering suicide seriously.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I do not
Every
mean
time.
I did not mean in any way to ever imply that you should take it flippantly.
Oh, no.
If somebody says they're contemplating suicide, assume they're contemplating suicide. And I'm going to get into some things to watch for and some advice that I remember from my training days.
Yeah, we should probably also put up the suicide hotline.
Yes, suicide. Let's get the suicide hotline out. And I am going to put the suicide prevention hotline, the link to the Don't Listen to the Demon video that inspired this, all in the description. I'll put, and of course you'll find the links to our sponsors, and we'll do them at the end of the show. But I'm gonna
also, if I could plug a moment, there are suicide prevention hotlines specifically for veterans as well. So if anything, if any of you guys either were vets or you're currently active duty, not for nothing, talk to your mental health guys. They'll hook you up.
Yeah.
Talk to your first shirt. They'll hook you up. No doubt about it, man. It saved my life more times than I care to count.
Yeah.
And you can get, it ain't too deep.
Yeah.
It is not too deep.
No, and it's important to note that difference because in a lot of cases, veterans deal with certain issues that the rest of us, don't. And somebody who doesn't understand that is not going to be...
Okay, not to interrupt, Brian.
Yeah.
1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255. Folks,
Yeah.
that is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's the only reason I felt the need to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. Good reason.
Yeah.
No,
Definitely a good reason.
if we can, Gina, I don't know if we can put it up there next to our number or...
Maybe just put it in the video description on YouTube or whatever, or on for each.
Okay.
And folks,
You know,
if you
also-
missed it or you don't, it isn't in the description because we usually go out to eat afterwards, so it's a little while before I write the description up.
That's what I was thinking.
Google. I just Googled suicide prevention hotline, and it was like the third or fourth thing down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important resource, and it's...
And the other ones are all other things. There's a number you can text. There's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, for people that that's a good point. For people that have anxiety and and issues with talking to somebody like a stranger on the phone, there is one that you can do purely over text, which is a great resource because I'm weird about talking on the phone. I don't particularly like talking on the phone.
A lot of people are.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes I'm weird because it doesn't bother. I like talking on the phone. I hate texting.
No, there are people that are fine with it, but it is sort of a very common sort of aversion.
It is.
But it's nice.
I mean,
that they have
and also, you know what? I mean, the thing is, it is 100% anonymous too. So don't worry if you're telling them that you're thinking about it. Suddenly, you're going to have a couple of white coats at your door. It's not the case.
No.
Especially with the military folks. Don't worry, you're not going to have mental health hanging down your door talking about you need to get your butt over to the freaking med squadron or med tent or whatever. They are not going to do that. All right. So dispel the fear. They're there to help. Believe me, they're there to help. Because not for nothing, us guys in uniform, former and current, we're the ones that do need to be watched the most because we see stuff that most people don't. Yeah. We deal with stuff that most people don't, and it'll screw with us in ways that we can't even imagine going in. Don't hesitate, seriously, because I noticed there's been a spike in military suicides in the last 5 or 6 years. I lost one when I got out of basic, a friend of mine. I lost at least 3 while I was active duty. I lost one about a couple of weeks ago that was a friend of mine, and I just had to try and prevent one last night. It's prominent.
Yeah.
It is.
And
it's prominent, more so than usual.
And there's nothing about asking for help that makes you weak.
No.
The people that are actually weak are the ones that are too stupid to ask for help when they need it.
Agreed. And you know what? The thing is, there's no such thing as a time limit on it either. In other words, if you feel like you're waiting that long makes you weak, believe me, no. Okay? You just pushed yourself to that point, and you want to know what? You finally reached that point where you decided that you did need that help. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
It's wisdom.
Yes. That's all it is. Wisdom.
And thank you, Gene. Gene got the phone number up on the screen. You should all be able to see that. You reach out. No matter how isolated you think you are, somebody gives a damn.
Yeah.
Yes. There's always somebody that gives a damn.
Well, and for for that humor, as they say, if you think nobody cares, try missing a few payments.
Yeah, right. Or you want to know what the thing is? Here, I'm going to extend this out here right now.
Yeah.
If there are any veterans right now listening to this, all right, that got a problem, look me up. Seriously. I kid you not. My phone will be open. Okay? I will direct you to resources needed. All right? I guarantee you. There is no such thing as nobody willing to listen or help.
Contact me and I'll help you get in touch with him.
Yeah.
Or I'll help you find resources.
Good guy.
Yeah. Because it's a rough deal. It's a rough deal. It's not easy for anyone to go through. And you know what? If I can help, I will. I'll direct you to where you need to go to get the help that you might need. And I'm going to say this. There is no shame in getting on meds.
No, none at all.
They help.
Yeah, they do.
They help.
One
They
of the
help with the
reasons-
nightmares. They help with the visions. They help with the PTSD. Last night, I stood indoors for a majority of the night. Okay? And I live out in Pennsylvania where fireworks are prominent.
Yeah.
Okay? Big booms, they freak me out. You know what? I got no shame in admitting it. I'll be
Nothing
put
to
on
be ashamed
meds,
of.
but I'll be happy.
You're not the only vet
know what I mean?
known who's had issues with fireworks.
No, it's biochemistry. I mean, there's to it, and that's again one of the reasons why when we started to we came up with this the idea of doing this show at last night's, or not last week's after thing where we were talking, and one of the reasons I jumped on and supported this so much was, I want people to know that there is no shame in coming forward and talking about it, and there shouldn't be a stigma. I talk about it because, I believe that. I don't believe there's any shame in telling people that, you have, it's no worse than me saying I'm diabetic. It's like, it's a fact of life.
No,
it's
isn't.
a condition I have. And it just is. You deal with it.
I mean, I knew about that before I invited you to be my co-host.
Yeah.
And it didn't affect, that fact didn't affect my decision one way or the other, because it's a common thing. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's as relevant to, hey, Brian, you want to be my co-host as the fact that you're diabetic is, which is to say it isn't.
Yeah.
Except, well, no, in this particular case it is, because you and Baron both bring a personal element to this that's important.
Yeah, which is I think a good reason enough to do this show.
And I think it's also worth noting, for anyone who doesn't realize this, a lot of very famous, very important people have dealt with these issues.
Oh God, yeah.
Many that you wouldn't have even thought ever had to deal with it. I mean, think about it. Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about
that
it
man
this
was
week.
all smiles.
Oh man, yeah.
A lot of comedians are severely depressed.
Yeah.
There's a reason why. They say that they cover up a lot of their pain with humor, and nobody was funnier than that man.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine.
He covered
up
a lot of
take
pain.
it from me. Here's a phrase, a mantra, that anybody that's ever thinking about it, it's a first line bit, okay? Taking that check early, that's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes.
There's no such thing as a permanent problem.
I've actually had that heard that in therapy. Like that's a saying that they use is, don't make permanent solutions to temporary problems.
I want to say as well, and I think this is also really important to get into, because there are probably people like me out there listening that aren't faced with chronic depression, who've never seriously contemplated suicide. But most of those people out there who haven't been in that position, you probably know somebody who is or who has been.
Yeah.
So there's some things to watch for. And, you can look online and find a list of warning signs that someone is suicidal. And I'm not going to disparage those lists. I'm not a psychiatrist. But in my personal experience, and I've actually used this to save somebody's life, sadly the same person who later would go on to commit suicide many, many years later. Yeah. But the three key things to look for in the way that is, don't look at what people say and what people do. Listen to what they you need empathy. You need to listen to what people feel. If somebody comes across to you as that they're feeling helpless, hopeless, and worthless, if they haven't contemplated suicide yet, they're probably going to.
Yeah, and don't wait until it gets to that level.
And if you think somebody's contemplating suicide, here's a real helpful tip: ask them. Because people have this horrible idea that, wait, if I ask them, I'm going to give them the idea. No. Bullshit.
The idea is well out there.
Yeah. And even if they haven't thought of it yet, you saying it to them isn't going to make them consider it.
No, it might actually stop them from really thinking about it.
Yeah, it's never a bad thing to ask. It's always a good thing to check in. And another pro tip, something to look out for. Okay, because this was something, frankly, one that my friend did was a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Check in with them. Every once in a while. You notice you haven't heard from somebody in a while, or you notice every single time you invite them out, they don't come out. Either drop in on them or give them a call. That's all. Because I guarantee you, when they're feeling that way, they feel like nobody cares, or nobody's there, or nobody's listening.
Isolate. It loves to
isolate. They isolate themselves But the irony is that the way that they're feeling like they're isolated from an outside source. They don't realize it's a self-perpetuating cycle. You get too anxious to want to go out, but you want to go out to conquer it, which in turn makes you even more anxious.
Yeah, and in an ironic way, from speaking from the inside perspective, a lot of times you feel like, I feel miserable. I don't want to inflict this on my friends or the people that I care about. I don't want to bring them down. I don't want to be the wet blanket. So they don't feel like they can reach out and talk to somebody because nobody wants to feel like the person that is just bringing the party down. But the fact of the matter is, most of the time, your friends want to hear from you.
Yeah,
they want to help you.
If you don't know what else to do in this situation, if you have somebody who's committing suicide, the simplest, first and most basic thing you can do to help somebody: shut your mouth and listen, and let them talk. People, it's something I was taught in the training, and it's something I firmly believe. People have a far greater ability to fix their own shit than they realize, and sometimes the best thing you can do is you let somebody talk, you let them work things out, you ask them a couple of questions to keep them talking.
Yeah.
And key thing, you have somebody you think is, God forbid, somebody, you got to talk a shotgun out of somebody's mouth. Keep them talking, because the longer they're talking, the longer they're not pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
Exactly, and not only that, get them laughing.
Yeah.
Point out something funny that you guys did that the guys can laugh about. Get them thinking about good times. Get them thinking about better times, because I guarantee you, it's escaping their brain
Get them out
when it needs it the most.
Remind them of all the things they have that matter. They have. No matter how depressed, how alone they think they are, they have people that care about them.
Yeah.
They have things they
do.
They have hobbies they do that matter to them. They in psychiatry, they call it hooks. You're looking for, you want to look for the hooks, the things that give them, even if it's the stupidest thing in the world, if it gives them a reason not to do it, it's a good enough reason. A perfect example from the documentary Trekkies, James Doohan, the guy who played Scotty.
Oh yeah, I've heard this story.
Met
very good story.
A fan at a convention who was on the edge of committing suicide. Convinced the fan to meet him at the next convention he'd be at.
No, he actually called the guy.
Yeah.
He heard about this, and he tracked the guy's number down and called him at home.
And convinced...
And said, I'm going to be at this convention coming up. I want to see you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was heroic.
And as I understand it, he kept doing that. He kept doing him. Well, if nothing else, I've got this convention. I'm going to meet this guy again and he's expecting to see me.
Mm-hmm.
It may seem to you, as the person who's not in this crisis, as the silliest reason in the world, but there's no such thing as a silly reason if it gets them to not commit suicide.
Agreed.
And it's one of those cases where people, there was a similar Muhammad Ali at one point was watching TV and he was talking with his people and whatnot. On the TV, he sees a news story about a guy who's climbed out onto a ledge at a hotel and realizes the hotel is like just down the street from where he is. He got in his car, he drove down there, pretty much walked right past the cops. The cops were like, hey, wait a minute, you can't go in there. He's like, I'm Muhammad Ali. And just walked right past him. He went up to the thing, got out on the ledge with the guy, and started talking to him. And basically eventually managed to talk the guy into, back into the room, just on the basis of who he was.
And I mean, the reality is if somebody's that close to the edge, they need to go into treatment.
Yes.
Yeah.
But whatever gets them there is needed.
You need to get them off the ledge.
Yeah.
And get them to realize they need the treatment. And again, realize, Robin Williams, you want a political example, Abraham Lincoln suffered terrible depression his entire life.
Yeah.
Especially when he was president. Most of the great scientists had patches of depression. Like we said early on, Bill Murray. Like we said early on, a lot of very brilliant people. In fact, there's studies that show that the more intelligent you are, the more prone you are to depression.
Oh yeah, because you can think of all kinds of stuff, all sorts of reasons why you're not good enough, and all that. And it's terrible.
And everyone
it becomes a self-pressuring thing, really.
Yeah.
And I'll say it again as a Christian: God does not make junk. Every living person has value. I don't care how horrible you feel. I think if I'll say right now, anyone who's listening to this show, I appreciate you. Brian appreciates you. This show and all the other shows we do are because people care. If no one cared, we'd stop.
Yeah, if nobody was watching, it's like, what's the point?
Again, it may seem like a silly reason, but you have, if nothing else, you have two people sitting right here talking to you, and admittedly other people, but talking to you who do care, who do think you are important.
Exactly.
And there's other people out there too.
Is there anything?
No,
Third one right here.
yeah.
Yeah. I
There are
mean,
people
that's a
you know that
big
care
offer.
too, is the reality. Because you may think, well, you'll never meet us. Although we do enough conventions that if you can get out to this coast, you probably will at some point.
We're not anything special. We're not
Yeah.
we're not even James Doohan level, much less Muhammad Ali. So it's not hard to meet us.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, that makes me think. Should got a convention Brian and I are doing
Yes.
in September. We ought to send the contact information to you.
Oh.
It's up in Pennsylvania too.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's a convention.
So, in other words, you guys got a third panelist now.
Well-
Maybe.
Well, you'd be
Or at least we can plant you out as a shill in the audience, and you can kind of like
I'll
lob,
hypnose the entire crowd into
I was
thinking
also
it's
just
on.
lob
thinking-
softball
They'd
questions
probably
at
be
us.
interested in you doing a hypnotism performance.
Yeah.
Well, get the event organizers in touch with me. We'll
Yeah.
see who set it up. And you want to know what? If anybody's listening that's in the area and you feel
So-
like you want to talk to somebody that matters and, whatever, all three of us are going to be there.
Tell them they have a desperate desire to buy books about vampires. That's
There's what you need to hypnotize and to donate to the show.
The entire,
That or meet one.
yeah, the entire.
So for Brian and I are still, I think, discussing details, but we are both going to be appearing at an event. It's called Haunt Fair. It's September 8th.
yeah.
It's ultimately as I understand it, one of the organizers is currently going through breast cancer treatments, and it's to help offset that.
Oh, nice.
So it's a wonderful cause. It's like,
Yeah.
wait. Somebody, I've lost some good people to cancer. I'm a big believer in
Same.
anything to help with cancer. So I emailed her. It's like, okay, I want to help. Here's what I can do. I don't want money or anything. I it's
And
a worthy cause.
There'll be
Same.
some others. I'm going to be in August. I'm going to be at Iron Garden again.
I want to go back there. I want to.
Really?
Oh, there's werewolf.
I saw.
Yeah, I posted that. So if people want to show up there, I'm going to try to.
Yeah,
make that.
Brian and I have both spoken at Iron Garden. Brian more times than I have.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
But
I got to
that's
talk
when
to
they're
you,
doing
Brian,
the
get me in
werewolf
there,
stuff.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, come up with us, man. That'd be a
Definitely.
time.
Fantastic.
And for that,
The thing is that since I'm not going to be doing Renaissance Fair this year, I'll be free.
Yeah.
All right.
There
and
you
there's
go.
some other events that are in the works I don't want to get into yet because
Yeah, but
things
we'll
haven't
be
been
announcing
officially.
them.
I know about things that haven't been officially announced yet, but we're gonna probably be busy come September, October.
Oh, October
There you go.
usually is my month. That's the one
Yeah.
month I can actually
October
get
is our
people.
month in general.
In
It's
general,
like-
yeah.
That's our Christmas, more or less.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, I love Christmas, but I've always been a Halloween boy.
We're a Halloween team
Yes.
kind of.
Amen.
group.
Amen to
I
that.
was looking into maybe the three of us could start not huge events, but do something.
Could do something.
Hell
local.
yeah. Three amigos. You got one guy that writes vampire books. You got another guy that is a hypnotist, and we got you and with the spiritual and the ghost.
Yeah.
The three amigos.
Why don't we start setting up in a library and start doing?
Yeah.
Okay, folks, if you're listening in and you're in the New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and you're interested, reach out. You can contact me, Kevin M. Paranormal.paranormalencyclopedia at Gmail, or you can reach out on Facebook.
We'd be
Let us
happy
know.
to
If
talk
people are
paranormal
interested, we can
stuff.
put something together.
Mm-hmm. Damn
And the three
right.
of us, you can listen to the three of us drone on as long as you want to listen to us, pretty much.
And maybe even learn
No
something.
doubt.
Yeah.
I don't guarantee
Exactly.
that last part, but it's
No
worth
promises
a shot.
on education,
Right, but it's worth a shot.
but at least it'll be fun.
So maybe now's
Yeah.
the time to, now that we've sort of gone through the topic, maybe we do the sponsors.
Yeah, we probably should give a shout out to our sponsors.
Yes.
Um,
Just to be responsible and pay the bills.
yeah. So, folks, we're going to start with, as we always start with, really, Audible. Audible is a great program. If you're not familiar with it, you need to be, especially because here's the thing. audibletrial.com/paranormale. audibletrial.com/paranormale. Free 1 month membership and a free audiobook.
Yeah, which usually like about a $25 value.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a pretty good freebie.
And I think it's like, what, 15 20. There's a couple of membership options,
Yeah.
but if you want to
don't-
keep going, it's like $15. It's cheap.
Yeah, you don't have to pay a whole lot.
And if you stop at any time, you keep the audiobooks.
Yep.
It's great. There's thousands of audiobooks. All of Brian's stuff is on there. Some of our other guests are on there. There's a ton of other options out there in every subject you can imagine. You could go sign if you haven't done an Audible trial account before. Sign. What are you waiting for? Sign up.
Yeah.
Get the free month. Get the free book. There's nothing to lose.
I love audiobooks personally.
I
they're
sit in
fun.
the car 8 hours a day
Yeah.
for work. 4 days a week. What do you think I do all day? I listen to audiobooks.
You're stuck in the car doing
Don't-
workouts, things like that.
Don't say that. Your boss is hearing you.
Yeah. Well, for people that are
My boss
dyslexic
is aware of what I do.
or have issues with reading, sight related whatnot.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
Like
So
be
it's
sometimes very
helpful.
good. Some people with dyslexia or ADHD,
Yeah.
sometimes audiobooks help more. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But it's great for a bunch of things. The other sponsor, of course, we want to talk about is NordVPN. Remember VPN, Virtual Private Network. Folks, if you need internet security, these guys are great. Prices are very affordable. It's military grade encryption, and what you're doing, you get on the internet the way you always do, and then you're getting onto one of their servers, and then from there you're actually surfing the internet.
Yes.
Which means you have all the encryption going to their server, and then the encryption going back to yours through your service provider. It's a double level encryption. It's military grade. All of your records are not being kept by the VPN, and your service provider is only seeing you go there, so it gives you a level of privacy. I'm not necessarily condoning anything illegal, but that also means the government can't subpoena things. If you live in a country like China, which has the Great Firewall, where they block you from visiting a lot of websites, NordVPN gets you around that because you can choose which country you're signing in from.
And your information is protected by Vikings.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
What? Oh, sorry, no.
Oh, wait, no.
No, that's not true. That part is not true, but it should be.
But that link is way too complicated for me to read out loud, so it'll be in the description.
Yeah, but you can also just look up NordVPN on.
Yes, but if they use
Google.
our link, we can.
Oh, that's
you want to
right,
help
we
the
get
show,
money,
you use
yeah.
our link.
Use
So,
our link.
Brian,
Sorry,
stop that.
Get money. Yeah.
And then, of
money.
course, if you have a good VPN, you already have an Audible account, you can always consider going to our Patreon, patreon.com/demonology, patreon.com/demonology. If you're broke, trust me, I feel you. I've been there. Go to YouTube, subscribe to us, like us, leave a comment, tell us what you thought. Share it with your friends, get them to subscribe. That does a lot of good for us, and it doesn't cost you anything. Another good option is Breach.tv. Anyone out there who wants to do their own videos, check out Breach. They pay their creators much better than YouTube does, and they treat them better too. And you can upload to both. You'll find my stuff on, pretty much it all goes up live to YouTube, and then by the end of the night, it's on Breach as well.
I'll be having some videos up there soon.
Yeah.
Once I can make them.
Oh,
Same.
Basically.
which also reminds me of something else to promote.
Yes.
Because we finally have a date. So next week, which will be July 11th, which is my 42nd birthday.
Oh wow.
So keep in mind, next show, I will officially be the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So feel free to call
Nice.
in with those deep philosophical questions.
I'm already past it, so.
Well, yeah, you're just old.
I'm already old.
I'm approaching.
Yeah,
Slowly but surely, I'm approaching.
At any rate, my friend Lupus Creepus, if you guys don't know him, go to YouTube, look up Lupus Creepus, Will It Kill Me? Great show. He does he's been off the air for a while, and this is him coming back. But he does creepypasta readings, and he does ritual pastas. He'll test them live and videotape it to show you. He's done dozens of them, some of the wackiest things you'll find, like the devil game.
Yeah, I've actually started watching him. He's great.
But he and I, next week, live, probably around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, keep an eye on the Facebook and the YouTube. And that's Eastern Standard Time, as always. But we're going to start doing horror movie reviews. We're starting with The Conjuring. And we finally nailed down the date, so that'll be it. I'd love to have him on here. Unfortunately, he's 3 time zones away. So while we're on the air, he's still at work.
Someday.
Someday.
Could always do a late night broadcast.
Could go back. Yeah, potentially, or go back to. or like we're doing it. We're going to be doing it on YouTube. I don't think
Maybe if we're doing it at a con,
yeah, maybe.
late at night sometime we can.
Well, it is on my bucket list to beg, borrow, bribe, or threaten a convention into bringing him out here, because I think he'd be great.
Oh well, that would be something. I was just thinking more like the video call.
True.
Like if we were doing the thing at a convention late enough, where the time zones match up.
Or on a weekend when he doesn't necessarily have to. We'll figure something.
Yeah, good. Do it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, but I hope this show has been helpful for people. I didn't see a lot of comments popping up while we were here, but feel free to keep comments coming after the show is posted.
Yeah, and we, anyone out there who wants to reach us about this or anything else, keep in mind I'm on Facebook on a daily basis. I see any messages you send to the Paranormal Encyclopedia page will get through. My producer Beth is on there too from time to time, so somebody will check it. Somebody will get back to you. YouTube, I check the comments there. I check the email that's attached to you on a daily basis. If you want to reach out to us, if you got a question, for that matter, if you've got a problem with the paranormal and need help, feel free to reach out.
We're ready to believe you.
Next week, and we're putting our foot down unless something incredible changes. But next week, we're finally going to get to the topic of deals with the devil. Barring, Stephen King wanting an interview next week or the end of the world, maybe. That might stop us from doing it next week.
Maybe I'll pop in person.
Please.
Yeah, come and talk to us about the deals you've made.
Yeah.
Wait.
Gain your nefarious power.
Oh, crud. I'm not going to be in town next Thursday. Oh, man.
Call in.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to be in Chicago next Thursday. Dang it. For another con.
Nice town.
Call in.
Nice town, though.
You could even Skype it potentially. You could just call in. You can call in even if you're in Chicago. They have phones in Chicago last I checked.
Yeah. I may call in.
It's not that remote a town.
And Baron, you're all okay. Next week you're busy. There's a chair open for you whenever you're available. You've always.
You kidding me? At this rate, I might as well be a second co-host.
It could happen.
I'm not objecting. Are we objecting to this idea?
We had 3.
Yeah. I'm as willing as to take as many co-hosts as I think can keep the show relatively on track. And
anything we can do to minimize Kevin's rambling,
See, he's joking, but I actually agree with that on a serious level because I get tired of having to try, especially not so much when you're here, but nights where I have to kind of carry the show because you haven't been able to make it.
Yeah.
Until Beth gets here.
You make it sound like I can't. I'm the one that carries the show. What the heck is wrong with you?
Nights that I'm here by myself until you get here, so I have to keep rambling by myself without somebody else to help me.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's always tough. Like the few nights that you haven't been here, it is true. It's hard for one person. Unless you've got like a really juicy topic or a script or something to
even when I have a good topic I can go on with, it's good to have somebody there to bounce ideas
a second person to just reflect on.
Lou used to do the show all on his own. I don't know how.
Yeah, some people it takes.
But
a special
I don't
talent.
have his gift.
Yeah,
I work better with the co-hosts, and I think an extra co-host is a great addition.
Yeah.
If you think that you can't handle it on your own and you think it's a gift, I've got a contract you can sign.
Yeah. See, I told you. I knew it.
Hey, still got to get back to how the very first Deal with the Devil story involves a saint.
Oh, nice. I'm gonna look into like the literary deals with the devil, so I can comment on some of the better tales.
There's certainly no.
Or maybe some of the more contemporary stuff that's been coming out here and there.
Oh, there we go. That's from what I see. That's something you could contribute.
Hearing a lot of stories, I've seen some books and some stories about in the rock and roll, heavy metal, some of the music.
Oh God, yeah, the most famous, one. But
even more recent. Well, in terms of your classic blues, there's Robert and Tommy Johnson.
Yeah.
Who have the Crossroads story, which we'll get into. But there's other more recent versions, too.
Nice.
And, folks, if you go back a few episodes and listen to our interview with Matthew Swain about the ghost of country music, there's paranormal all through the music industry. And this goes back long, long before you think, and still a thing.
It's
Okay.
all there.
All right. So I think that
I think
that
we're
about
probably
does
pretty
it.
good. Baron, do you have anything you want to add before we close out for the night?
Avoid lightning rods.
Where,
Good advice.
where are you going to be in Chicago? You said you're going to a con.
Yeah, promote it.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a HypnoCon. It's an adult-only HypnoCon. I'm not even sure they're still selling tickets, but it's one of those. But you know, it's a pretty good con. It's been held every single year. They don't know if they're going to be doing it again next year, but you know, I get the honor to present for them and do a little bit of hypno there. So
There you go.
all the kudos and awesome.
Hypnotoad.
Obey the Hypnotoad.
Can't believe I was able to do that with my mouth. That's cool.
That was very good.
But
Thank you.
and yes, I do think the three of us will probably look into trying to set up some sort of. I almost want to call it like a mini convention of just the three of us. Because why not?
Why not?
You know,
Could be fun. I mean,
Have it in Jersey, and we can like do a partnership with New Jersey.
well, that's what I mean. There's a lot of people I know that could, we could get in that are local that. Could
If we
just
got-
come in and do something.
if we got like a bunch of people together, running out like a room in a hotel is expensive. If we got like 10 people, like not just all speakers, obviously, but like to split the cost.
Yeah.
And okay, here's the deal I would make potential vendors for this idea. It's like, we split the cost of running the room evenly among everybody, and that's your vendor fee. That's it. You can sell whatever you want. You get the space you want. You bring, we'll try to get you a table, or you bring your own.
It's actually a good idea. 'Cause
The only money we ask is you're going to chip in equally, and we'll chip in too.
So if they get more people to come in on it, the
Yeah.
cost goes down.
Exactly.
So that's pretty brilliant.
And it
There
may,
you go.
and from my experience, conventions, and admittedly the conventions I'm talking about are much bigger than this is going to be.
I don't know. This would be
Although
like a
this will
hotel
grow in
ballroom or
time,
something. But,
But usually they charge like $200.
oh, yeah. Or, yeah,
Three,
at
three,
least.
$400 for a ballroom, maybe $500 for a ballroom. At 10 people divided up, that's $50 each. It's
And
still
that-
a lot of money to
And
plenty
that's
of
if
people.
we
but
don't
that's a
charge
lot
anybody, people to
Yeah.
to come in,
Yeah, ticket
Well,
sales
so we
alone,
charge
be able to
people
cover
come in,
anything else.
Then that'll go
try to
to
recoup.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
We'll have to see.
there's gonna be we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
For that matter,
Mhm.
I think probably next week I'm going to start a new Kickstarter for the show. The Patreon isn't quite doing it. Maybe I think a more focused Kickstarter will help to try and keep things going.
Yeah.
I think very easily this could be a stretch goal.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm.
And lo
Yeah,
and behold,
Shoot
you
for
guys
next
want this to
Halloween or
happen.
something.
You donate in, and we'll rent out. The more money you donate, the bigger the room we're gonna rent,
Yeah.
and we'll get we could probably hopefully get some people from the station to come and hang out too. But yeah, that's gonna
Definitely
do
would not be a bad thing.
for tonight, folks. This is your host Kevin Mears. As always, I want to say good night and God bless. And again, if you need help, reach out. The number's at the bottom of your screen now. It will be in the description as well.
Yep.
Brian?
Author Brian McKinley. You can find me at brianmckinleyauthor.com. Also on Facebook. Live long and prosper.
And Baron?
Baron V Voltage, stage hypnotist extraordinaire, evil sadistic hypnotist, well renowned. You reach me at baronvvoltage@gmail.com.
Good night, everyone. God bless.
Right.
Good bless.